stories, more than three. But first of all, Stand By Me is, maybe my favorite song from that era of all time. And interestingly, I mean, initially it was called The Body. It was from a Stephen King group of short stories called Different Seasons. As a matter of fact, we made another short story, The Shawshank Redemption, was also. It's a great book. But we all felt that you can't call this movie of Stephen King to call it The Body. It's going to give the wrong idea that it's a horror thing. It's Stephen. So we, Stand By Me was my favorite song, and so I decided we'll call it that. And I did a benefit for Lieber and Stoller, who wrote Stand By Me. It was a cancer research thing at Carnegie Hall, and I hosted the evening, and Benny King was on the bill. I mean, they had a lot of great performers singing Lieber and Stoller song, and Benny King came up to me and said, "I want to thank you for basically resurrecting my career." You have to understand, that song, 25 years earlier, was #1 in America, Stand By Me. The film came out, and 25 years later, that very recording, not a cover, but the exact recording, went to #1 again. So all of a sudden, he got all over the place. One other thing I'm going to tell you, which actually happened while we were making this movie. You remember the scene where the boys come down, they find the body, right? And I wanted it to be, kind of windy and overcast and kind of, give it that moody feel. And the problem is, we were up in Oregon. They said, "Don't worry, it's going to be rainy. It's going to be 60 straight days of summer." sunny day. So I said, "Oh, but." So what we did is we silked in literally half of Oregon. When we put a big, silks up and covered this whole area, so it gave it that overcast look. But I wanted the wind blowing, so we took all the Ritter wind machines from Hollywood. We brought them up. We had a bunch of them around. We had E-fans everywhere, and to cover this big area. And we had production assistants, with monofilaments, pulling on the bushes so that everything was, because we couldn't cover the whole area. And there was a PA named Carol Bonifil who was on one of these. There was like a series of bushes were over here, and she was like, and we started to roll. And all the machines were going, they were flying like this, and I'm looking over the corner and I'm seeing there's one area that's just dead, there's nothing moving. And Irby Smith, who was the AD, it was so loud from all of the machines going. I said, Irby, look over there, they're not moving. And at the top of his lungs, on a bullhorn, he says, "Carol, yank your bush!" And needless to say, we didn't get that take off so fast. That's a moment that, you see these things. And I was talking to my wife, and I said, "There's Carol Bonifil." She didn't do it. She eventually did it.
The things are all so amazing. River Phoenix is so commanding.
Yeah.
And could you just talk about the casting process and working with these kids?
Yeah. Well, River Phoenix, it was extraordinary, and it was so. I mean, he was gifted. He's like a young James Dean at the time. I mean, he was so brilliant as an actor, and it's just so weird and ironic that he disappears out of the film. He's the one guy who dies. Now, in the true story of, this is based on an actual thing that happened with Stephen King. He went on this trip with his 3 buddies to find this dead body. They did exactly what is in the thing. And Stephen's 3 friends all died very young. And I just thought, wow, that's gonna be tough for an audience to think that happened. So I decided, well, one of them, and it was Chris Chambers' River. And then, a few years later, he goes, and it was like, whoa, it was like this and to this day, I watch this and I go, wow, because I saw him shortly after that, and he was messed up. I mean, he was doing drugs, and his parents didn't know what to do. And the weirdest thing is, Leonardo DiCaprio told me that he saw River that night. You know, right when he was at the Viper Room, you know, up on Sunset, and that's the last time anybody ever saw him. But I got to tell you, this guy was as good an actor as any adult I ever worked with. You remember the scene where they're sitting around the campfire early, and he tells the story about the teacher who took the milk money and they blamed him for it, you know? And we did this scene a couple of times, and he didn't get, you know, I wanted him to, you know, break down from it. And so I took him aside, and I just said to him, I said, River, I don't, you don't have to tell me what it is. I just want you to think of a time in your life when an adult let you down. Somebody that was important in your life and let you down. Tell me what it is. And the scene that you see, the tape that you see, is what happened after he processed that. And I never did hear what it was. I'm assuming maybe it was his dad or something. I don't know. But what you're seeing there is what is the result of that. And so, you know, he was like an incredible actor. And the scene that, and people have asked me, you know, over the years, what's your favorite film of all, you know, I've made like 22, I don't know how many movies. What's your favorite? And I said, you know, I make the joke, you know, you love all your children equally, you know, even the rotten ones, you know. And I have had some movies that didn't do so well. But this one, I always talk about this one because this was the first time I had made a movie where I was doing something that my father never would have done. I mean, I always looked up to my father, I followed in his footsteps. The first movie I made, you know, this is Spinal Tap, which was it's a satire. You know, it's a satire. And my father, that's what he trafficked in, satire. I mean, with Sid Caesar, in the old days of shows, the early days of television, he was doing that. The second film I made was A Sure Thing, which was a romantic comedy. And my father had done, you know, with Doris Day, he had done a couple of things. So they were, you know, I was not trading off, but I was in the same lane that he was in. This film was the first time that it completely represented an extension of my personality. It's, you know, it's got humor in it, it's got melancholy, there's nostalgia to it. It's the 50s. I was 12 in 1959. These are the songs that I loved and listened to. And the scene where Gordy starts to cry there when they find the body, that scene, I wrote that scene I was in Eugene, Oregon. I was in a hotel room, and I wrote that. I was sitting there by myself writing that scene, and I started crying when I was writing it because I knew at a certain point, I did know that my father loved me, but I also knew that he didn't ever understand me. He didn't, because I was so different from him. He was much more sketch-oriented and, you know, high comedy. I had this other part of me, this kind of, like I say, melancholy part. And so I'm writing this because that was my way into this thing. Originally, the story was just, there were 4 boys going to see a dead body, and Gordy was like an observer. He was just one of the 4. But when I decided to make him the main guy, then I said, okay, I'm gonna feed my own experience through him. And what drove him to see this dead body was that his brother died. He didn't cry at his brother's funeral, and he thought that his father loved his brother and wished that he had been, you know, Gordy, it should have been you, you know, that. And I'm sitting there writing, and then I have, you know, Chris Chambers saying, no, he loves you, he just doesn't know you. And that was the way I felt. I mean, I didn't think my father did understand, you know, who I was, and he did love me. But, you know, your children, you know, sometimes the parents don't. I'll never forget when I was a little kid, you know, I wanted to be like him, you know, and my parents said, I don't remember this, but I was 8 years old, and they said, I came to them and I said, you know, I want to change my name. And they said, well, oh boy, this poor kid, he's worried about living in the shadow and living up to and all of that stuff. And they said, well, what do you want to change your name to? And I said, Carl. I wanted to be like him, and I wanted his approval. And, for the longest time, he didn't, he didn't think I was all that good, and he didn't know what he was going to tell me. I was in Summer Theater when I was 18, and I played the lead part in Enter Laughing, which was based on a book that he wrote. It was a play that was on Broadway that Alan Arkin played in, and he never thought I was that good. He didn't say that, but I found out later from Martin Landau when I was sitting and having lunch. Now, I had been on All in the Family, and I was successful. I had done movies, and Martin says to me, your dad, he never thought you could do anything, And I said, well, I kind of sensed that, but and the biggest rejection I ever got in show was, actors always talk about, you get turned down, and it's a rejection and all that. I auditioned when they made the movie for Enter Laughing. I auditioned for a smaller part in it, and he turned me down. He didn't want me. That's as big a turn down as you can get. Anyway, but then later I was 19 years old, and I directed a production of No Exit, of all things, as John Paul Sartre. Richard Dreyfuss, by the way, who's in the movie, and he's the voiceover in the movie. He was in that production. He's a great actor, and he was terrific in it. And after the show was over, my father comes backstage, and he looks me in the eye, and he says, "That was good. No bullshit." And when he said that, it was like the first time I'd ever gotten that stamp of approval, and it meant a lot to me. So but this movie has all that stuff about how you think your father feels about you and what it does to you. And so I always point to this film as the one that means the most to me.
What's kind of nice about that is there's the kind of the Mark Twain comedy story that he wrote that could be in the jerk, or it could be something, and then it helps show the realism all around it. It's set up that way.
Yeah.
The realism in this film is amazing. Like, the kids are filthy, and their camaraderie feels so genuine. How did you get them? I mean, you got 4 kids in one shot doing 4 different things.
Well, that's a great question, because in the case of like Jerry O'Connell, he was the youngest. He was 11 years old. What happened to him? He got so handsome. He married that beautiful woman. Anyway, didn't have much experience. River had a little bit, and Will did. Corey had probably the most. I mean, he had done a couple of things. But I was an improvisational actor, and that's where I was trained. I was trained in that way. I had my own improv group. I was in the committee here in Los Angeles that came from San Francisco. And there was a book called Improvisation for the Theater. It was written by a woman named Viola Spolin, who they looked at her as, she was like the godmother of all improv. Her son was Paul Sills. Paul Sills created Second City in Chicago, and also the Compass Players before that, which was Mike Nichols and Elaine May and Shelley Berman. But that's my training, and what I did with those kids, the 4 of them, I had acting classes. For 2 weeks, we're up in Oregon, and we did theater exercises. We did improvs. I had them working. So by the time we were ready to shoot, they had become a unit. They were a real unit. I don't know that I could have done it just, I'm the most proud of, there's one shot, if you see them, the 4 of them are walking towards us, and they're talking about, I can't remember what they were saying, but you see, it's just after, I think, a chopper, they're walking, past after the junkyard, and they're talking to each other, and they're singing, and that's, I think, when Have Gun Will Travel comes in at that point. And if you look at it, we never cut until the end of it, and there's the 4 of them, and they're walking towards us, and they're picking up cues, and they're overlapping with each other, and that is stuff that it takes years of acting and classes and stuff to be able to do it, but they did it because they were a unit. That I'm so proud of them that they were able to do that. And just
The shot with Corey and Jerry, they're on the front, and then they take off, and they come hitting the mark all the way down behind them too. It's so much choreography.
And they hit the mark, and then when they stopped, then I did a couple of cuts there. But if you look, they just walk straight through.
Your bridge on the river Kwai scene, it's so beautiful. Yeah, it's such a great adventure.
Yeah.
Can you talk about setting that up? I love how all of this.
This was a crazy day because, first of all, you have to. The kids can never be in danger. I mean, we never put them in danger. I used a 600 millimeter lens so that when you see the kids on the track, the train isn't even on the track. It's so far behind them that, if they ran forward, they'd be off the track before the train even entered that track. So, but it looks like the train's right on top of them because the compression you get with a long lens like that. So they would run towards me, and we had a dolly track lined up, and the grip was pushing that dolly track. It was sweltering hot in Oregon that day, and they would come through, and they were not particularly frightened because there was nothing to be frightened of. There was no train there, And then I said, come here, fellas, I want to show you something. I said, see, and I ran the train through. I'm standing on the side. I ran the train through. I said, see that? That is 10 feet behind you. You got that, pretend that that's 10 feet behind you. They get back on the track, but again, they don't feel it, and they go, and they're going, like this. Oh my God, what is I gonna do? And so I said, okay, listen to me. You see those men over there? They're pushing that dolly, they're pushing that camera. They're tired. They're really tired. And then why they have to keep doing it? Because you're not doing what you're. I'm going like this, and they go. I said, roll the camera, and they're running. They jump off the track and they come to it and they go, God, we did it. That's that's beautifully infamous. They were great. The kids were great. Oh, one great story. So River, they were all young guys. River was he was turning 14 or just going to be 15. I think he was 14 for the most part, but he was about to turn 15. And he comes to work one day. He's got a big smile on his face. I said, River, what's the story? He says, I lost my virginity last night. I said, wow, for 14 years. He says, yeah, it was a friend of the family, and she was very nice to me, and she showed me the ropes and showed me what I was supposed to do. That was great.
Was there any pushback? Because you had kids swearing and smoking. I mean, they're talking about actually how 14 or 13-year-old kids kind of talk.
Yes, we did, and there was there's a quote, I think it probably still is, but when he says, why don't you go home and fuck your mother? So that gave us an R, and we had an R rating, but we said, it's fine. But I had to get River's mom to agree to that and we still got a fine. We got fined, I think $5,000 or something like that. But if she had said, no, I'm not having my kids say that, we couldn't do it. But she was cool. She was an old hippie, and she was fine. She was fine with that, so we were able to do it.
This wasn't R. Right?
Yeah, R-rated. R-rated.
We all saw it, so it didn't matter. One of the things I wonder if it's in the script or choice you made at the end where Richard Dreyfuss doesn't narrate, and he's just typing the last couple lines. Yeah. It hits so hard when you just read them yourself. Yeah. Was that always?
That's in the book. That's in the Stephen King short story. I had friends like you did when you were 12. Jesus is anyone. And it's true. I mean, if you remember, that's a critical time in your life. You're going through puberty, and the kids that you hang with. And I had 3 friends. I was always one of 3. When I was growing up. One of 4, excuse me. And So that was, I don't, you know, if you remember those times that your hormones are going and you don't know, and life is confusing. The people you connect with at that time are usually, you know, you can go through your life with them.
It's such a fun film when you watch it and then get sadder the rest of the time you watch it in your life.
Yeah.
You know? But was it a choice that he didn't speak it, that you showed it typed out?
Right.
I love it that way.
Well, the reason I did that, I mean, you know, obviously he's the narrator of the film, but that narration is the book that he's writing, the story he's writing of it. He says, you know, maybe someday you'll if you're harder for material, write about us. You know, Chris Chambers says, and so he becomes the writer. We see the guy who, you know, we see him at the beginning, thinking about back at the time that he had that, and he sees those boys go by in the bicycles, and he starts thinking about his, and then he writes this, and he becomes the writer. He's the one that's writing that at the end, and you wanted to see him write that, yeah.
We'll open up in 1 second, but
Yeah.
what was it, when I saw it, I was young, and it was like, oh, this is a masterpiece. Did everyone think that this was immediately a masterpiece at the time? How was it received?
It was received pretty well, and this was very exciting for me because I thought this film represents my sensibility, and if it doesn't do well, then I don't know what I do. This is what I do, but it did well. You know, it was successful, got good reviews, and interesting. I mean, the movie business is so different now. I mean, it is so different. You know, we never did more than $3 million or $3.5 million in a weekend, but it just stayed in the theaters, you know, and people learned about it and they went to see it. And, you know, now they don't want, the studios don't even want the pictures to go in the theaters, you know. Spinal Tap was in the theaters for 3 weeks, you know, and that was a big deal. You know, the Lost Bus was there for a week and a half, and, you know, a picture that George Clooney made with Brad Pitt, that didn't even go in the theaters, you know. So it's a different time, but you know, it's too bad because look, you guys had a good, I mean, it's a shared experience. It's nice to sit with people. And I remember reading a book when I was, you know, started making films. It was by Frank Capra. It was his autobiography, and he said this thing that it's just stayed with me, which is, he said, you're asking, and this is, you know, changed now, but at that time he said, you're asking people to pay money to sit in a darkened room with total strangers, and you better put something up there that's worth looking at for 2 hours, you know? And so I always thought about that, and as a storyteller, and you know, so many really great directors, they think that way. They want to put on a show. You want to entertain the audience. You want to do something, put on a show. And now it's like you put something on and nobody watches it at the same time, even if it's something people like. They watch this one. You can't sit at a dinner talking about anything you've seen because the person didn't see it. Did you see White Lotus the first episode? No, don't tell me. I'm only on season 1. You can't discuss anything, you know.
You weren't here yet, but the whole place burst into applause right after the pie scene all together. It was the greatest feeling, right?
Yeah.
To all come together and down the, you don't know each other. Who has some questions? Right here.
Mr. Reiner, I love this movie. I saw it when it came out in the theater, and just going back to the casting for a moment, how did you find them? Because you know it gelled very well. I think only one of the 4 actors really had experience. So how did you find them?
He's asking how we find the 4 boys, and that was a process. That was a real process to find just the right people. But when they came in, you know, you have a certain thing in your mind of what you want to see. I mean, Gordy was going to be the sensitive one who had, and Vern was kind of a goofy one, and Teddy had rage and anger, and Chris was the more wise. And so when they came in, they were, you could see those qualities in them. But I saw tons and tons and tons of young actors. And I gotta tell you that Corey Feldman playing Teddy Duchamp, that was the toughest one, because at age 12, he was 12 going on 13 at the time, to have that kind of rage inside you, or to be in touch with that. He had a background that I didn't know that much about at the time. It was rough. And he came in and I went, wow, okay. And he was the first guy that had that. And you know, River had his wisdom, and you just look. Now, when Jerry O'Connell came in, this was great, because he had to be the kind of goofy, funny one. He comes in and he reads it. He doesn't know what he's reading, the thing, and then he looks up at me and goes, "Hey," he goes, "Are you that guy on Channel 5? He had seen reruns of All in the Family or something. "That guy on Channel 5. I said, "You're the guy, you're the perfect
Right here?
Was the pacing mostly on the page, or did you really have to work to find it?
She's asking about pacing. Pacing is just something, it's like, you know, with a conductor of an orchestra, you have a feel for what you want it to be. You write a script, and the script is there, and you hopefully you've shaped it in such a way that you don't have to, do too many handsprings to get it to work. But I'm not saying this about my abilities. I'm an okay actor, I'm an okay writer, I'm an okay visual guy. I'm not great at any of these things. I'm okay but I'm good at everything. And and you put all that together and you get a sense of what it should be. I know a rhythm, I can sing on pitch. I don't play an instrument, but I can sing on pitch, and so I have music in me that came from my mother. And so, when I'm looking at a movie, you just get a feel of the beats of it and the rhythm of it, and you can feel it when you're watching. That's why people, they always give cards, when the movie is previewing, they give you cards and people write out what they think, and they judge it and, grade it, whatever. I don't need the cards. I can sit in the back of the theater and I can feel when people are shifting or somebody gets up and moves, and that to me tells me everything. I can feel the audience and I know, oh, that's too slow, that's boring there, or maybe I rushed that moment too much. I can see they didn't get that thing. So it's just a feel that you have, I mean, that's the way it is with me,
The rest in between, you show the kids just sitting there for a few seconds before the dialogue really came in and let you kind of ease into the situation.
It depends on the scene, It depends on the scene, and it depends on the scene that's before it and the scene that's after it. Bill Goldman once taught me, and I learned a lot from him. We did Princess Bride together, and he also wrote the first draft of Misery. I think you're gonna see. Yeah. He wrote the first draft, and Andy and I wrote after that. But he would always tell me, he said, there's a spine to every story. There's a spine, and every scene has to attach to the spine, whether it's to advance the plot or to develop the character, which is in service of advancing the plot. You can't deviate from that, because if you take a side trip, you're going to slow the momentum of it. The motor is going to start stalling. And he says, unless you have the greatest tap dance in the history of motion pictures, you don't want to stop the movie and do that. And so I always thought about that, and it's so funny because, he wrote one of the great movies of all time, Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, and there's a song in the middle of it. Raindrops keep falling on my head. And I look at that and go, boy, that stinks. It's so bad. The song's not bad, but it's bad in that movie because, you want to show Paul Newman is with with Catherine Ross, whatever. But get the movie going. I watch people on a motorcycle, a bicycle singing that song. Anyway, and Bill never liked that either. He didn't put that in there.
Right here.
I was wondering if there was like a pivotal point or like a scene where you realized that the movie was going to be great, like while filming it.
You know, he's asking the toughest question. Is there every moment that you think that the movie's gonna, you never know if a movie's gonna be great or not, and that's in everybody's judgment, you know? When I finish it, all I can think of is, do I like this? Did I do what I thought I wanted to do with it? And then if I can answer that at yes, then that's all I can do. Then it's up to the critics and the people going to see it, and they'll judge what works for them. But I can only say, okay, that worked for me, and I liked it. And I learned something very early on in my career. I was 23 or 4, and I was just starting on All in the Family. It was by the way, do you ever hear of All in the Family?
Yeah.
Oh, no, I'm asking that for a reason, because a lot of young people never even heard of the thing. Anyway, it was a big hit show, and it was on, #1 for 5 years in a row. And I remember running into somebody, just a guy in the street, and he said, "Oh man, you're that guy on All in the Family." He said, "Wow, that's the best show on television. That's so good. That and the Beverly Hillbillies are my two things." And I got it right then and there. I said, he likes the Beverly Hillbillies, he likes it. I'm not gonna worry about what the other people like, because I can't make the Beverly Hillbillies. You know, I can only do what I do, you know, so, you know, you can't give too much power to reviewers, you know? And audiences, you know, they'll either get it or they don't get it, and, you know, there you are. Nobody got Spinal Tap when it first came out. Nobody got it. I mean, it was nothing. I mean, people came up to me and after the movie was over, they said, "What are you making a movie about a band nobody ever heard of?" It was a satire. So, you know, they didn't know, and so it took a while before people caught on to it, you know.
Right here.
Can I ask a misery-related question?
Yeah, Misery
Okay,
is coming
so,
up.
can you share a memory with Kathy Bates, because she's so unhinged in that movie? I love
Kathy
her.
Bates is so good in that movie.
Right.
And she won an Oscar for it. She was a stage-trained actress, so she loved to rehearse. Jimmy Kahn was an instinctive actor who hated rehearsals. So I wound up having to rehearse more than he liked and less than she liked. But what she told me, I mean, because she inhabited that character, and she said it was horrible. She'd go to the home, and then it was living with her, and it was torturing her, this twisted person that she was playing. And I told Kathy, I said, "Look, you are so damn talented. You don't need to take that character home with you. You have to trust your instinct and your instrument, that when you get to work, it'll be there for you." And that kept her sane so that she could be insane, you know?
The opposite of the kids from San Diego, me directing them, is Lauren Bacall. The
Yes.
exact opposite, like, what was it like to direct Lauren
Oh,
Bacall?
she's Lauren Bacall, isn't she, you know? I mean, when you get in front of a legend like that, you basically just say, "I'm glad Lauren Bacall's in the movie." And you let them wear whatever they want, you know? No, she was great.
Awesome. Right there in the middle back there.
What was it like working with Stephen King?
Stephen King, this is a great, a great thing. We did, at Castle Rock, we made 7 Stephen King movies, you know, aside from Shawshank and Misery. We did Dolores Claiborne, Needful Things. We did a bunch of Stephen King movies. Here's an interesting thing. After I did Stand By Me, he came, and I showed it to him at a private screening. You know, it was just me and Andy Scheinman and Ray, Gideon, Bruce Evans, and Stephen. We all just watched it. And I was so nervous because this was a personal story for him. This was his story. And we finished, the lights come up, and he says, "Let me just go think about it, and I'll come back." And I'm going, "Oh my God, what did I do?" And he comes back and he says to me, "This is the best adaptation of anything I've saying much, but because he didn't like a lot of the things. I think he liked the Shining, but he didn't like a lot of the things that done. But he said something that was also great. He said, every once in a while I'll see something that I wish I had thought of. And he said, because in the book, it's Chris Chambers that picks up the gun and stands the older boys down. And I had Gordy pick up the gun because to me it was about a coming of age for Gordy. He was the main character, and I wanted him to, become the stronger one. And he said, when you had Gordy pick up that gun, I thought, why didn't I think of that? I thought that was pretty cool. That was pretty cool.
The soundtrack is incredible. Did you have a hand in picking the music for it?
Every single song. Every song. Like I said, all the songs were songs that I grew up on, songs that I love. But you also want to pick a song that works, for the moment. It's like when they get to the trestle. I've got the Buddy Holly song in there, and it works there. Or when they're going walking down and you have Lollipop. So I find the songs that I think will fit the moment. And Take Out the Papers in the Trash and Yakety Yak was a perfect song for the chicken game they played. So I try to find songs that work, but these are all songs that I love. I loved all of these songs. As a matter of fact, I just did a thing for Lieber and Stoller. They honored again. I mean, Lieber's not with us anymore, but Mike Stoller is. And that was my era, 1959. These are the songs that I had a stack of 45 records with a big hole in the middle where you put them on a turntable, and these are the things I was like the guy in Diner. I could tell you what was on the flip side of an Everly Brothers song or whatever.
Did you imagine you were going to do Stand By Me throughout the whole thing in the way that you did?
Yeah. Once I knew the title, I was gonna. And by the way, the guy who scored the movie, he developed that bass line at the beginning. Dum 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 dum. He was in that session, and there's a couple of cues where you hear this kind of very eerie kind of high-pitched sounds. And what he did was, this is Jack Nietzsche, the guy who did the score. He had these glasses, and they were all filled with different amounts of water. And he would go around the rim, and he would make those sounds, and that's something that he was able to do. So yeah.
Time for a few more. Who else has one? Over there.
I wanted to ask about the chicken scene with Kiefer Sutherland. How did you film that? Because you see the car drive over the logs.
Well, that he actually did. In that truck, did go over those logs. Yeah, I mean, you have stunt drivers and guys that know how to do that. And they were never in danger. Again, you use a certain kind of lens. But they actually drove over those logs.
Very good.
Yeah, what did your dad think of this film?
I loved it. He loved it. Yeah, no, he was a huge fan of mine, And here's an interesting one. The first film I did, was Spinal Tap, and that came out in 1984. And the same year, he had a film called All of Me, which was this film with Steve Martin. He had done 4 films with Steve Martin. And at the end of the year, they always had these top 10 lists, the top 10 pictures of the year that were picked by critics and everybody. And we each had a film, Spinal Tap and All of Me were on tons and tons of these top 10 lists. And I thought, wow, when has that ever happened? When has there ever been a father and a son who both directed movies, and we took out an ad in Variety saying, hey, look at this. And now, if you go on the Hollywood, walk of thing, and our stars are next to each other, and then about a year or two before he died, we did that thing at the Grauman's where you put your hands and the feet, in the cement, and we did it together. And he suggested we should put our bald heads. They didn't want that.
Did Norman Lear have something to do with there?
Yes, Norman Lear owned the company Embassy, which they bought Avco Embassy, and they made Embassy, and the first film that I did there was The Sure Thing. And then they had developed Stand By Me, and I was the body at the time, and I was gonna direct it. And we went up to Oregon, and it was literally 2 days before we started shooting. Norman sold his company to Columbia, to Coca-Cola owned Columbia at the time, Columbia Pictures, and they didn't wanna do the movie. They said, no, cause a lot of times a studio will take over and then they scrap whatever's there. And they read it and they said, nah, we don't want it. And so now we're up there with we're ready to shoot, and there's no money, there's nothing. And Norman, God love him, he stepped up and said, okay, I'll pay for it. And he paid, it was like $7.5 million at the time. And we made the movie, but we didn't have a distributor, we had nobody. And so we went to every single studio, every one of them turned it down. And we went back to Columbia because there was a new guy running Columbia at the time. I said, well, might as well try this. And the guy at Columbia, he screened it and he said, it reminded him of his childhood. And he said, I love the movie. He said, I don't know if it's good, it's gonna make money or not. I want to distribute it. That kind of thing doesn't exist in our business anymore. There's nobody at any studio that you can go to and say, what about this idea? And they look at it and go, yeah, I really like that, let's make it. There's quadrants and algorithms and how many likes and followers and things. I mean, and it's a committee, and it's never anybody that you can actually sit in a room with and say, what about this picture? Nobody, this doesn't exist. So in those days, there were people that said, yeah, I like that, let's go make that.
Right there?
You've worked with a lot of child actors and their parents. What's the most important thing you say to parents of an acting kid?
Well, here's what I say to the kids before I say anything to the parents, because you can tell with the kid. The kid comes in, and you can tell that the parent has pushed him, I will ask the kid, I said, do you like doing this? Do you like this? Is this fun for you? And you can tell if someone will say, yeah, it's the best, whatever, you can tell that it's separate and apart from the parent. And if it's not, then I don't usually like to be working with a kid that's been pushed there, because he's a kid. I mean, every time I watch a movie and there's a little baby in it, the baby may be a couple of months old or whatever, and the baby's crying, you see the baby crying. That baby's not acting. The baby's crying. I'm thinking, I feel terrible because some mother and father is fine with letting their baby cry, And I went, oh man, that's rough.
Time for couple more, right here.
What's interesting is this movie's very universal because, I grew up in a very different place than probably you did, at a different time than you did. And
Where did you grow up?
Florida. Florida, early.
What part of Florida?
Fort Myers,
Okay.
Tampa.
Okay.
And I know these guys. I grew up with these guys. Not
Yeah.
exactly these guys, but I knew them growing up. What do you think is the universality of it?
Well, I think what it is the connection that the boys have with each other. The guy who decided to distribute it, the guy who was running Columbia at the time, he was from an urban environment. He was from Pittsburgh, or cities, and so he didn't have that same background as of the kids who were in a rural area, but he related to the connection that he had with the other kids at that age, and I think that's what transcends it. It doesn't matter if you're from a big city or you're from a rural area, you feel those connections with the kids, and I think that's what makes it work.
Didn't John Singleton mention in Boys in the Hood? There's some part of Boys in the Hood that mentions, has something to do with Stand By Me.
Yeah, well, he always told me, a long time ago, he said, that inspired him to do Boys in the Hood.
Yeah.
It's the same kind of thing, it's kids hanging around with each other. doesn't matter that it's that neighborhood or whatever. I was from the Bronx. I was born in the Bronx, and I was, 12 when I was in New York, and so, it doesn't matter, you make a connection with kids.
We watched it in the woods of Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
Final question here, we have to wrap up. But you said you're not a good actor, but
I didn't say
I
I say I wasn't a good actor. I said I'm not a great actor. I'm not as good as Jack Nicholson.
Wow.
Do you want to act? You show up in Wolf of Wall Street and it's there's two directors always want to see more acting. One was Sidney Pollack and the other one is you.
Yeah.
Was there ever a chance that we might see you act?
I like acting. I mean, I did a little part in The Bear, it was on just recently. I don't know if you've watched the show, but I like doing it. If I get called to do something, I will do it, and I love it because there's no pressure. I'm not responsible. I remember years ago, Ronnie Howard, he calls me up and he says, I got this thing, Ed TV. It was with Woody Harrelson and Matthew McConaughey. And he says, there's a part there if you want. And I say, yeah, okay, I'll do it. He said, well, let me send you the script and see if it's something you would like to do. I said, you don't have to send me the script. I said, if it stinks, it's not my fault. I'll do it, and it's fun to act,
All right, well, let's watch you direct now.